On the 16th of September, after 8 restful days at Rodrigues, the mid-ocean land of plenty, I set sail, and on the 19th arrived at Mauritius, anchoring at Quarantine about noon. The sloop was towed in later on the same day by the doctor's launch, after he was satisfied that I had mustered all the crew for inspection. Of this he seemed in doubt until he examined the papers, which called for a crew of 1 all told, from port to port throughout the voyage. Then, finding that I had been well enough to come thus far alone, he gave me free pratique without further ado. There was still another official visit for the Spray to pass farther in the harbour. The governor of Rodrigues, who had most kindly given me, besides a regular mail, private letters of introduction to friends, told me I should meet first of all Mr. Jenkins of the Postal Service, a good man. "How do you do, Mr. Jenkins?" cried I, as his boat swung alongside. "You don't know me," he said. "Why not?" I replied. "From where is the sloop?" "From around the world," I again replied very solemnly. "And alone?" "Yes, why not?" "And you know me?" 3,000 years ago," cried I, "when you and I had a warmer job than we have now. You were then Jenkinson, but if you have changed your name, I don't blame you for that." Mr. Jenkins, forbearing soul, entered into the spirit of the jest, which served the Spray a good turn, for on the strength of this tale, it got out that if anyone should go on board after dark, the devil would get him at once. And so I could leave the Spray without the fear of her being robbed at night. The cabin, to be sure, was broken into, but it was done in daylight, and the thieves got no more than a box of smoked herrings before Tom Ledson, one of the port officials, caught them red-handed, as it were, and sent them to jail. This was discouraging to pilferers, for they feared Ledson more than they feared Satan himself. Even Mahmoudi Haji Ayub, who was the day watchman on board, till an empty box fell over in the cabin and frightened him out of his wits, could not be hired to watch nights, or even till the sun went down. "Sahib," he cried, "there is no need of it," and what he said was perfectly true. At Mauritius, where I drew a long breath, the Spray rested her wings, it being the season of fine weather. The hardships of the voyage, if there had been any, were now computed by officers of experience as 9/10 finished, and yet somehow I could not forget that the United States was still a long way off. The kind people of Mauritius, to make me richer and happier, rigged up the opera house, which they had named the ship Pantai. All decks and no bottom was this ship, but she was as stiff as a church. They gave me free use of it while I talked over the Spray's adventures. His Honour the Mayor introduced me to His Excellency the Governor from the poop deck of the Pantai. In this way I was also introduced again to our good Consul, General John P. Campbell, who had already introduced me to His Excellency. I was becoming well acquainted, and was in for it now to sail the voyage over again. How I got through the story I hardly know. It was a hot night, and I could have choked the tailor who made the coat I wore for this occasion. The kind governor saw that I had done my part, trying to rig like a man ashore, and he invited me to Government House at Rodrigues, where I found myself among friends. It was winter still off stormy Cape of Good Hope, but the storms might whistle there. I determined to see it out in milder Mauritius, visiting Rose Hill, Pep, and other places on the island. I spent a day with the elder Mr. Roberts, father of Governor Roberts of Rodrigues, and with his friends, the very Reverend Fathers O'Loughlin and McCarthy. Returning to the Spray, by way of the Great Flower Conservatory near Mocha, the proprietor, having only that morning discovered a new and hardy plant, to my great honour named it Slocum, which he said Latinized it at once, saving him some trouble on the twist of a word. And the good botanist seemed pleased that I had come. How different things are in different countries. In Boston, Massachusetts, at that time, a gentleman, so I was told, paid $30,000 to have a flower named after his wife, and it was not a big flower either, while Slocum, which came without the asking, was bigger than a mangel wurzel. I was royally entertained at Mocha, as well as at Rodrigues and other places, once by 7 young ladies, to whom I spoke of my inability to return their hospitality, except in my own poor way of taking them on a sail in the sloop. The very thing, they all cried. Then please name the time, I said, as meek as Moses. Tomorrow, they all cried. And Auntie, we may go, mayn't we? And we'll be real good for a whole week afterward, Auntie. Say yes, Auntie dear. All this after saying tomorrow, for girls in Mauritius are, after all, the same as our girls in America, and their dear aunt said, me too, about the same as any really good aunt might say in my own country. I was then in a quandary, it having recurred to me that on the very tomorrow I was to dine with the harbour master, Captain Wilson. However, I said to myself, the Spray will run out quickly into rough seas. These young ladies will have mal de mer and a good time, and I'll get in early enough to be at the dinner after all. But not a bit of it. We sailed almost out of sight of Mauritius, and they just stood up and laughed at seas tumbling aboard, while I was at the helm, making the worst weather of it I could, and spinning yarns to the aunt about sea serpents and whales. But she, dear lady, when I had finished with stories of monsters, only hinted at a basket of provisions they had brought along, enough to last a week, for I had told them about my wretched steward. The more the Spray tried to make these young ladies seasick, the more they all clapped their hands and said, how lovely it is, and how beautifully she skims over the sea, and how beautiful our island appears from the distance. And they still cried, go on. We were 15 miles or more at sea before they ceased the eager cry, go on. Then the sloop swung round, I still hoping to be back to Port Louis in time to keep my appointment. The Spray reached the island quickly and flew along the coast fast enough. But I made a mistake in steering along the coast on the way home, for as we came abreast of Tombow Bay, it enchanted my crew. "Oh, let's anchor here," they cried. To this no sailor in the world would have said nay. The sloop came to anchor 10 minutes later, as they wished, and a young man on the cliff abreast, waving his hat, cried, "Vive la Spray!" My passengers said, "Auntie, mayn't we have a swim in the surf along the shore?" Just then the harbour master's launch hove in sight, coming out to meet us. But it was too late to get the sloop into Port Louis that night. The launch was in time, however, to land my fair crew for a swim. But they were determined not to desert the ship. Meanwhile, I prepared a roof for the night on deck with the sails, and a Bengali manservant arranged the evening meal. That night, the Spray rode in Tombow Bay with her precious freight. Next morning, bright and early, even before the stars were gone, I awoke to hear praying on deck. The port officer's launch reappeared later in the morning, this time with Captain Wilson himself on board, to try his luck in getting the Spray into port, for he had heard of our predicament. It was worth something to hear a friend tell afterward how earnestly the good harbour master of Mauritius said, "I'll find the Spray and I'll get her into port." A merry crew he discovered on her. They could hoist sails like old tars, and could trim them too. They could tell all about the ship's hoods, and one should have seen them clap a bonnet on the jib. Like the deepest of deep-water sailors, they could heave the lead. And, as I hope to see Mauritius again, any of them could have put the sloop in stays. No ship ever had a fairer crew. The voyage was the event of Port Louis. Such a thing as young ladies sailing about the harbour even was almost unheard of before.